are live. Welcome everybody to another Beehive Growth webinar. I'm so excited to have everyone here today. Thank you so much for your time, spending it with us today to talk about a topic that is incredibly important to all of us here in terms of deliverability, compliance, security, all of the above. And I'm very pleased to be able to introduce my coworker and one of our top security people, our top security person, Mariska here.
Hi,
And yeah, let her give a quick intro.
I'm Mariska. I lead security here at Beehive. I have a deep background in deliverability, email, and security anti abuse, mostly email because of my anti abuse background.
Amazing. And yeah, so uh, to hype her up a little bit, such a valuable and critical role over here at Beehive. She's really working in the background to make sure that the success of our platform is possible because with any kind of email platform, you're always going to have people trying to get into the platform, send spam, send phishing, send all kinds of bad, illegal, nasty stuff that then ruins it for everyone else. And so we are very blessed, and it's so important to have her, and blessed to have her be able to join us today and take time out of her busy day fighting the bad guys to speak with us. Um, Cool. Well, thank you so much again. Sorry for saying thank you so much, but I'll probably say thank you 5 other times during this call. Um, and yeah, we can get started. Thank you so much also for your patience. I was got to not plan meetings before jumping straight into these webinars. So if you had to wait in the lobby for 2 minutes or 3 minutes past noon, you have my apologies. So today's webinar, Mastering the Inbox. It's something, like I said, very important to all of us. If your readers are not receiving, are not being able to see their newsletters in their primary inbox, if it's going to spam, all of these things are so important to the success of a newsletter and making sure that they are hitting the right inbox. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Tips and tricks for hitting that primary inbox, making sure that you keep your hygiene clean. We have a pretty stacked agenda, so we'll move through things pretty quickly. We're going to, as always, lay the groundwork, kind of cover the prerequisites you need to really be operating a successful newsletter. Jump into talking about sender reputation, talk about some deliverability best practices, talk about ethical list building, some of the frequency, timing, metrics that go into creating a newsletter that's going to land, touch on IP warming and dedicated IPs for the folks who might be joining us who are a little bit further along in their journey, maybe a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit bigger. And then talk about red flags that are going to get your emails blocked so we can avoid those. Lastly, we have 3 different playbooks that we'll share with you that you can swipe and apply today. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to cover the slides, and then we're going to toss it to Mariska for her professional experience and feedback on those topics. If you have questions, please drop them in that link. It's beehive.link/Q&A. Our wonderful producer, Tony, who's in the background here, pretending to be me in the chat, as well as, we do love Tony, yes, Cynthia. I'm going to highlight that if it's nice and quick. Can we do that? I don't know how to do that. Okay. Cool. But yes, we will answer those questions at the end, and then we're going to do something all together as a group. We're going to have people who join a little bit late, and they're going to invariably ask whether this is going to be recorded and where they can find the materials. And so when whoever that person is puts that in the chat, we're all going to respond, yes, it's going to be recorded, and yes, we're going to send you the link after the call. It usually takes 2 or 3 days to get processed, and all of the ums and ahs taken out, and those things. The timestamps put in, transcripts compiled. So we will put all of those things together in a post. You'll receive a link. It's on our blog. It's all of our past webinars, blog.beehive.com/t/webinars. You can see all of them there. And that's where it'll be when it gets launched. But you'll get that link in an email in about 2 hours. So with that being said, we got the housekeeping out of the way. We're going to let people know in the chat when they ask us where it's going to be recorded, and we're ready to get started. And I'm going to try to get rid of this ugly bar here. This always bothers me. this work? There we go, like a charm. Cool. Perfect. So if you've joined us before, this will be very, very familiar. We start every webinar by covering the basics. A lot of folks in these webinars from our surveys are just starting out, are very early in their journeys. And so we like to cover this each week. So if you've been here before, you can, hopefully not tune out for too long, but you can, grab some coffee, whatever you need. But in terms of laying the groundwork, we cover these all the time. First up, understanding your audience is going to be critical, relevant to deliverability, just like it's relevant in every other one. Understanding who you're writing to and who's receiving your newsletters is going to be so important to making sure that you're going to have those killer deliverability metrics that are going to get your emails placed in the primary inboxes. So, what that means is, the average across the market open rate is about 30%. If you really can get nailed down on who your audience is and write to that audience of one person and start building an audience of personas of people that you are very, very, tightly aligned with, you can get that open rate up to 50, 60, 70%. I've seen it happen. It's crazy when you see a newsletter that's got like 10,000 folks and 70% of the emails are being opened. You know that that person is very, very dialed in with understanding who their audience is. Next is consistent content. So a newsletter is not a one-time thing. You got to be consistently publishing. It doesn't have to be a daily. It doesn't have to be necessarily even a weekly, but publishing content on a regular basis that your audience can come to expect and to trust is critically important. People are spending their time in tons of different ways these days. Their time and attention is incredibly stretched. And so, they're making a choice every time they read one of your emails to take some of the valuable time and commit it to you. And so if your messaging is not consistent, if they don't know to expect you every Thursday or every second, Monday of the month or whatever, it becomes harder to build that habit of opening all of those emails, and that will then cause your open rates, all the engagement metrics to go down, which can impact your deliverability. Next, choosing the right niche, going down and getting very, very specific. It's related to understanding your audience, but the more niche you can go with a newsletter, the better typically. It's much easier to talk to that audience that you're trying to build when you are very specific. So, if we're talking about, I want to start a newsletter on food, that's obviously super broad. And when you go broad, it's much harder to kind of have that special sauce. My girlfriend has a bunch of dietary restrictions. She's gluten-free, she's vegan, or pescatarian, dairy-free, gluten-free. So very, very challenging to cook for her. It's a fun challenge. But if I were to start a newsletter on food, it would be, could be a great niche to basically create a foodie newsletter for people who are pescatarian, gluten-free, and dairy-free, because people who are in that audience share very, very similar challenges. We meet people from time to time who have the same thing, and they all have the same stories. It's that shared story and shared experience that creates resonance and can really drive that high engagement. Lastly, this one's we've kind of added in recent times, but going deep, not wide, is super important. We've talked about this in the realm of social media, really mastering and focusing on specific channels before you go everywhere. When it comes to analytics, it's a big world out there. Get really good with one tool before you start to expand. I don't necessarily know that there's a deliverability correlation here. Maybe it's like really focus on like one metric before you start moving to other ones, but I don't have much for you there on deliverability. But generally, when you have all of these different options, if you can go deep and really kind of master one medium before you expand, it's much better than going super wide and spreading yourself thin from the beginning. So with that out of the way, we are ready to get started for the main event that you all came for. So first step, there's a lot of text on these slides, a little bit more than normal, so bear with me if you're used to these presentations. It's kind of a heady topic, but we promise to make this understandable. So sender reputation is really where deliverability starts, kind of the entire process. And what sender reputation is, if you're not familiar, is a score that ISPs, internet service providers, email clients, all these big infrastructure tools assign to a sender of an email in our context. So they look at the IP address that a user is sending the email from, they look at the domain they're sending from, they look at the email that they're sending from, and basically this creates a profile that these ISPs score in order to assess trustworthiness and reliability. It's why if you are transferring from another platform, so say you're sending on MailChimp and you move to Beehive, there's going to be generally a period of a little bit of froth as you reestablish that reputation. At the very minimum, you're changing IP address. Many times you're going to be changing the IP address you're sending from, the sending domain that you're sending from, and the from person that you're sending from, the from email. What that equates to is an entirely new profile. So when you go from sending on MailChimp to sending on Beehive, the end user's inbox is going to see you as a completely new unknown quantity. And so part of that with us is, when people transfer to Beehive, you're put on the shared IP that is kind of the shared. We'll get into what that means deeper into it, but you're put on the shared pool that has an established reputation. And so when you move to Beehive, some of that's mitigated because these ISPs know that our IPs are very, very high quality, are very trusted, and so the only variables now are the new sending domain and who you are, sending as. And so with those two smaller, less, I guess probably less weighted in some ways, like heuristics, you can actually have really, really good deliverability when you switch over. Whereas but you still will generally kind of see a little bit of that froth. But getting back to the main point, sender reputation, critically important. It's going to building that reputation is kind of the number one priority with everything we're talking about today. So factors that are going to then affect your sender reputation over time: how many emails you're sending and the volume and the consistency. One of the reasons why our shared IP is so powerful. We have billions of emails being sent every single day. Mariska's got the security part locked down tight, so we're minimizing spam and bad actors who are sending through those IPs. We also have a practice of basically, this is very common. You have different pools, so it's like we kind of even segment further where if you have really, really good engagement, you're going to be with other newsletters that have really, really good engagement. And so that further helps promote engagement. So you really do get rewarded when you send good quality content that is getting opened. Spam complaints, another huge red flag or huge metric that goes into this. So if you have too many spam complaints, not only are you going to lose trust in the sender reputation, but we're going to see that. We see all of these spam complaints that get sent, or that get submitted for publications to send through Beehive, and that doesn't make us happy. We're gonna, that's when Mariska gets involved, and she's gonna check out your content and see why people are marking this as spam. Bounce rates are going to be if you're sending to users that if you're sending to emails that don't exist. We do our best to minimize that by checking every email that gets put into the system to make sure that it's a real inbox. But things change. People leave companies, and the emails get deactivated. Google is famously now retiring a bunch of old accounts, and so when you send a message and it gets rejected because the email doesn't exist, that's a kind of a knock on it. And then of course there's engagement metrics and content quality. So these platforms are going to look at the content for red flag words, and they're also going to look at your engagement metrics. So are your emails getting opened? Are people clicking them? And so forth. So all of that results in high sender reputation, leading to better inbox placements and deliverability. And if you want to check on this for yourself, there's tools like Google Postmaster tools, Return Path, and Microsoft SNDS. I'm actually not familiar with the second one. Mariska might be. Apologies if that's fake news. I used, we use some tools to help generate some of these slides, but Google Postmaster tools is legit. Return Path, I think, is a paid option, although they may have a free part of it. But with that, Mariska, is there anything that you can add to this and grace us with your knowledge?
Sure. So this is a really great slide to piggyback off of the last one, because the last slide really focused on the basics and understanding who you're sending to, which has a huge contribution to the sending reputation that you have. And so, like what EJ said, all of these things contribute to how a recipient views you as a sender. And so, all of these things on this list, especially when we're talking about that domain and IP marriage, the length of time that you've been sending with your specific sending domain and the sending IP, that earns trust with the recipients, because then they know what to expect from you. So when we talked on the last slide about sending consistently, the receivers want to know that what they are receiving from you is consistent in the amount of volume as well as the content itself. So that's kind of one of the other underlining reputational things that we're looking at. And like EJ said, the monitoring tools available, deliverability doesn't have to be like this black box. Instead, all of the the inbox service providers, they are willing to provide tools for senders to better understand how their messages are being received.
Are there other tools? So I know, like for example, with Google, you have like Google Search Console for Google Search, and then you have Bing Webmaster Tools. Are there other tools like Google Postmaster Tools from other providers? So like Google obviously provides it within the context of Gmail, but does I'm blanking, but like would like AOL, dating myself a little bit, but is like do those tools also offer like similar corollaries to Google Postmaster Tools?
So, Google Postmaster Tools, Microsoft, and Yahoo are the big reputational that they'll give you like dashboards to better understand your deliverability with them. But almost all of the inbox service providers also provide what they call feedback loop reporting,
Mm.
which is that when a user on their network goes ahead and marks an email as spam, they'll report that back to you to let you know that your recipients aren't engaging with your mail.
Yep.
They are letting you know that you should be unsubscribing these users. So they're very transparent with the way that they are looking at email that's received.
Yep, and I see a question here, breaking a little one of my rules, but the question was, do we provide users with logs, and we do. So within Beehive, within your segmentation tools, you can actually segment by delivery status. So there's a couple in there. Delivered, obviously sent. Deferred means it's just been held for a little bit and will be sent later. Bounce, but also I believe spam is marked as spam is one of the ones that we surface there. We also do surface the spam rate. So you can, in segmentation, you can mark, say, show me users who marked as spam. I'm pretty sure if that's fake news, please correct me. But I'm like almost certain we've seen that. But otherwise, you can go into these tools and you can see directly from these providers. There is some technicalities, some technical stuff like I believe there's like with Google, maybe Google doesn't. Sometimes when you do like oh no, that's the unsubscribe thing, I think, right? Sometimes Google, some of these things don't forward all of the headers to us or don't forward stuff back to us, I've heard. But going into the tools, you can see that directly. So yeah, in the name of time, we'll move along. Um, cool. Second one. So here we'll get into some best practices. Some of these will be a little bit, we foreshadowed a little bit, but in order to maximize your sender reputation, there are best practices that you can follow, and many of them are listed right here. So authenticating your emails. So this means going and making sure that you have your DMARC, DKIM, and SPF records set up so that these inbox providers can verify that the sender is the person who owns the domain and that your domain isn't being spoofed, that your the sender, the person who's the email that's being received is being sent by the real sender. Maintaining clean lists. So this is something we've discussed with some of our past webinars around automations and some of the other ones, but maintaining a clean list in terms of churning or unsubscribing users who have shown a history of not engaging with your email. So if you've sent them 10 emails and they haven't opened a single one, might be a good candidate to remove from your list. It's really not about size, it's about quality. And so it's a lot of times people get wrapped up in having like a big email list and big numbers on their email list. But it's really it's much better to have a smaller list with higher deliverability and engagement than it is to have a much bigger list that gets lower engagement. It's not just a difference in terms of the number of people opening it. There are real differences in how you're perceived by these tools. And so with that, I dodged making a bunch of different innuendos with talking about list size. So proud of myself and moving right along. Personalizing content can be really, really helpful. So One of the signals that inboxes may use is, if when you're sending out a bunch of emails, a big bulk blast, is the content customized for that person. We don't have a ton of insight into this, but we do believe that this has an impact. We don't provide currently on Beehive specifically the ability to use custom fields within subject lines, but that's a feature that I'm hoping that we'll add before too long, where you could actually like say, special message for, and then put a first name. That's something that is fairly common if you're not on Beehive, and hopefully we'll add that soon. But short of that, adding that content into the actual body of the newsletter, where you can personalize the intro and whatnot based on data that you have about your subscribers. Fortunately for Beehive users, you don't have to worry about optimizing the email design. When we talk about optimizing email design, we're talking about making sure that like the email is lightweight, that it's mobile friendly, that it's not going to break or look ugly in a certain inbox. One of the challenges that we see consistently, Outlook is famously one of the more challenging inboxes to work with because it doesn't include all of the styling. And so, we've worked really, really hard to make sure that your emails do look as close as possible to what you're intending when they get sent there. But all of this being said, it's not about the look and feel, it's about the weight of the email, making sure that it doesn't get clipped, making sure that we're not actually sending images basically as attachments, that these are being loaded remotely. There's a bunch of stuff that's happening under the hood to make sure that your emails are optimized. We also monitor these blacklists, blacklists and block lists. I think that's kind of the same term, but we prefer the term block lists. You can do this on your own. Every time you send an email, you can look at the IP of where it was sent from. If you're in Gmail, maybe we'll include a screenshot of this, but if you go to Gmail and you basically look at one of the emails that you've sent from Beehive, in the settings you can view, I think it says like view original, and you get like this big long, it's like code basically, you see the raw code. Within there you can actually see the IP address that it was sent from, and you can take that IP and you can plug it into different tools to see the lack of block lists that Beehive IPs are on. But if you are not on Beehive, you might find that an IP is on a block list, and then you can basically monitor that to see when you get taken off, or reach out to them to request that you be taken off. Implementing double opt-in is a very controversial topic in the world of newsletters, but implementing double opt-in can be a way to really effectively make sure that your list is super clean. We don't require it. I think technically all newsletter platforms would recommend it, because it just is a way to ensure that people are actively, one, receiving your email and they've seen it when they've opted in. So it creates some of those good signals, but it also is like that active opt-in. And so you're going to basically be filtering for people who are more engaged. That being said, a lot of newsletter folks don't prefer to use it because you do see a drop off. Usually it's about 20% of users who maybe sign up don't actually ever end up going and clicking that opt-in. And so it can inhibit growth a little bit. But with that being said, if you really, really want to create a very, very concise, like very clean, tight list, double opt-in can help. And then segmenting your audience, ensuring that you're monitoring that performance. It kind of goes back to the maintaining the clean list, but short of maintaining the clean list, segmenting your audience by engagement so you can monitor that engagement over time gives you the data and the analytics, to be able to understand how people are engaging with your content. Mariska, do you have anything to add there? I know you work a lot with the block lists that we monitor, and dealing with those. Maybe that's an area we can double click on. Or any other best practices that you're recommending to folks from a security perspective.
Absolutely. So, ultimately, one of the biggest reasons why we include personalized content on deliverability best practices is because over time we've made a big shift in the industry that inbox service providers are looking at engagement as a big weight in how they are going to handle reputation and deliverability. So when you send emails that are highly engaged with, you're more likely to land in the inbox in the future. That being said, personalizing the content and knowing your audience is providing content that your audience wants to engage with. So if we send a security professional an email that is about recent trends in ransomware, they're probably more likely to open it than if we were to go ahead and send them an email marketing high-heeled shoes. And so, because of that engagement, we want to make sure that we know our audience. We're sending relevant information at a relevant cadence that they're more likely to open, and things like that in order to have that contribution to our deliverability.
Perfect. Such great insight. Sorry, you have.
Yeah, no. I was just going to kind of hop around a little bit. If you had something else to add to the personalization,
No, no,
I'm
keep
happy.
going. You're on a roll. This is why we
Okay.
have you.
One of the other things that's on here, we suggest users go ahead and monitor block lists for any time that they might be flagged. While the block listing, not all of them are created equally. What it can be used for is a signal that maybe you can do better in following best practices. So, not everybody gets on a blacklist because they necessarily are a terrible spammer, but they could potentially get on because they've made some mistakes because they haven't followed the best practice list to the letter of the law. Um, while it might be questionable in the newsletter industry, within email deliverability specifically, there's no question about double opt-in. We always want to go ahead and make sure that users are engaged. And the reason why we ask for double opt-in, aside from all of the legality and reasons why you would want to do it from a compliance standpoint, it's been proven that it goes ahead and it improves our deliverability as senders because we know that we are sending email to people who are actually engaging with the content. And so that helps deliverability a hundredfold. You would rather having high quality users than high volume users, or a volume or a large quantity of users. So quality over quantity, for sure.
Amazing. Love that. Thank you so much. Perfect. So we will move on to the next step, and a lot of that is going to be covered here. So very intuitive flow, moving from best practices to ethical list building, and how we're going to take some of those best practices and apply them to our process of collecting opt-ins. So if you've joined us from other newsletter, or sorry, other webinars, we've talked about growth. We've talked about growing with social media. We've talked about growing with paid ads, and these are all ways to obviously build that list. And so what we can do is layer on some of these ethical practices to those growth tactics in order to ensure that we stay in the good graces and have the best deliverability possible. So we said it. I promise we weren't just calling off from the slide, but quality over quantity is the name of the game. When you are collecting those subscribers, making sure that you are explicitly getting the opt-in to message them. So obviously you have to collect users through an opt-in form, but having like a clear call to action of like that they are subscribing for a newsletter, even sharing like how often that you're going to send to them, kind of setting those expectations can be really, really helpful in terms of making sure that the user is signing up and what they're getting is what they asked for, so that they don't ever feel like, oh, I didn't realize I was going to get flooded with all of these messages. All I was doing was trying to put my email in to get, entered into a giveaway. With that said, also, we've seen with kind of AI and some of these tools that we've, the data tools that are out there, people trying to kind of take a shortcut to growth by either scraping emails from tools like LinkedIn or other places across the web, or even buying lists from tools. I won't name them to give any ideas, but there's plenty of data tools out there that you can basically buy a list and do cold email for. It's worth calling out that cold email is explicitly disallowed on Beehive. We're not a cold emailing tool. And if you do not have that explicit opt-in and can't show us where that opt-in came from, That is one of the ways that you will get blocked and kicked off of Beehive if you do any of this, scraping or using data tools to just download a giant list of people and upload them into Beehive. You will not get away with it. Mariska is very good at what she does. And our tools are very, very sophisticated. There's not really a lot of detail we can go into on the signals that we use. So don't ask because we're not going to answer it. And I'm especially not going to give anything away with Mariska on this call because I'm not going to get in trouble with her. But you will get caught. We will find out. It's not the right way to go. It's a shortcut, and the shortcuts, just like everything else in life, shortcuts, are short-term gain for long-term sadness. So from there, implementing double opt-in. We've talked about that on the previous slide. One of the ways you can really, we've talked about this with a lot of our other growth tactics, but offering some value in exchange for their newsletter or for their email address. This is just a kind of a general good tip in terms of, getting more opt-ins, but having something like a lead magnet or something that you're delivering to them to provide some value can not only obviously encourage them to give them your email, but the punchline with deliverability being they're going to then go to their inbox to download whatever you're trying to send them or read whatever you're going to send them. So it causes that behavior and starts building that habit of getting them into the inbox. I kind of jumped the gun. Never buy email lists. We covered that. Clearly communicate expectations. We talked about that. Making unsubscribing easy. We do that with all of the best practices of including like the unsubscribe header. So it's very easy for users to just do that from many of the inboxes where you can, like with Google, it's like, you can do it from the general view. It's also required that you have a link in the emails to unsubscribe, and we deploy those automatically in the footer. So if you're not on Beehive, you got to make sure that you have those. I think most platforms, if you don't have the link, they will not allow you to send, or they'll flag it. But if you're not on Beehive, make sure that you're doing that. And then regularly clean and update your list. So make sure that you're always tracking those metrics of engagement. If things change over time, you're adjusting those heuristics. Maybe you find that you're going to say, okay, I'm sending weekly, so if somebody doesn't open 10 emails, which means they haven't engaged for 2.5 months, you're going to churn them. It's worth revisiting that. Maybe like the actual signal is maybe they haven't opened in a month. Why wait 2.5 months if it's like the same result? If you can churn them more quickly, clean your list more quickly, you'll get to that place. You'll have those better signals with the inbox, and you'll get to a better place much more quickly. We've already talked about a bunch of that, so I'm just going to move along to the next one so we can keep things snappy and tight with the time we have remaining. So a lot of times we get these common questions around frequency, like when should I send, what metrics are good metrics, all of these things. So while the short answer that I prefer is that, all of these things really depend on your newsletter specifically. I can't tell you, how often you should send your newsletter, technically, because every newsletter is different. If you're sending daily, you're going to be sending it every day. If you're sending weekly, generally I can't say, okay, if you send it at, 10:30 a.m. on a Monday, it's going to get the best open rate. There is data that says, maybe that's the best time to open. I don't know that that's the case. I'm just making up numbers. But even if that is like the broad data set, what we find is that individual newsletters all behave differently. So like the average is just that. It's the combination of everybody's emails kind of in one big bucket. And in a lot of ways, it's not actually that useful in some contexts. So if you are talking to finance professionals who are just workaholics and working all the time, sending them a newsletter at 9 a.m., the general best practice or the general benchmark may be that's the best time to open. But if these people are at work at 7 a.m. and they're already 2 hours into their workflow by 9, you're not going to get a great engagement rate. You want to basically know your audience, calling back to the groundwork, and understand when are they most likely to be checking their email? When are they going to be having the time to sit and engage? With that being said, what we're not going to be able to do is say, hey, this is how often you should send or when you should send, but we can give you the tools to basically figure out that balance for your specific case. So frequency, again, depends on the type of newsletter you have. But with that being said, like if you're sending daily and you're a marketing newsletter, and you're just sending general tips that's not super timely or kind of news focused, you might see a degradation in open rate if people are getting fatigued because they don't necessarily need to see that content every single day. If you're a news-based newsletter, something like a Morning Road or Milk Road or Morning Brew, that is kind of going to be a very intuitive use case for a daily format. And so understanding kind of what makes sense for your audience, is going to be key there. And again, we're not necessarily strictly talking about open rate for the sake of open rate. What we're talking about is the balance between deliverability, like how often inboxes are seeing your emails in users' inboxes, and how often they're seeing them engaged with. So open rate as a metric is a proxy of that, but this isn't about necessarily maximizing open rates just to get more eyeballs. That's kind of more along our content-based stuff. This is around, I'm making this distinction so we kind of keep the conversation in the right headspace. This is so that when you're building your reputation, you are building the best reputation you have possible. So with that being said, optimizing for frequency, optimizing for engagement levels. So one of the things you can do that we see a lot of folks do is if you have like a premium newsletter, segmenting your best kind of recipients, the people who are opening every single email, and getting them to upgrade to a premium version. And then maybe you give them a Sunday edition, and so that increases your sending volume, and it basically adds that volume at a level that's going to get very, very high engagement and show these really, really strong signals. One of the things you can do in terms of timing, Beehive does provide a map when you go to send of when users are most likely to open your emails. So right now what we would recommend is basically testing out different send times over a couple different different editions of your newsletter. Maybe you send one at 9, the next week you send it at 10, the next week you send it at 11. I wouldn't recommend constantly testing this like for years and years, because then people aren't going to necessarily know when to expect your newsletter. But when you're starting out, when you have a couple thousand subscribers, you can get some good data, you can start to see the trends of when people are most likely to open your email, and you can base it around that. So again, time zones are also something to take into account. We talked about that example with like finance people who maybe already be working by 9 a.m. But if your audience is in Europe and you're on the East Coast, sending at 9 a.m. is going to be delivering midway through their day. So maybe scheduling it so that it arrives in their time zone accurately. One thing I'm sure many people are thinking about is a time zone, specifically sending to individual users in their main time zone. That's something that we've had on our radar and a roadmap for a long time, and hopefully something we'll tackle within the next coming months. But some sort of feature where you can basically say, hey, send to my user at 9 a.m. in their current time zone is something that I would expect to come to Beehive before too long. And then as you're doing this, the metrics to track: open rate, click-through rate, conversion rate in terms of whatever you're tracking. Conversion rate can be, we've talked about this in the analytics one on Tuesday, your subscribe rate on the website. So if you're not getting a ton of people opting in, your messaging may be off, which then can have downstream effects if you're getting the wrong users. Unsubscribe rates, so people who are choosing to no longer receive your messages, and then spam complaint rates. Mariska, do you have any feedback here? You don't have to. We can move on if there's nothing to add. We're good to go? Cool. Awesome. So again, we'll move through this one pretty quickly. It's not necessarily a ton that's super actionable, but do want to make people aware. So IP warming is the practice of when you start sending from a new IP address, basically feeding that IP address very, very high quality signals as you're getting started. So with Beehive, you don't have to worry about this. If you are just joining, you're automatically on our shared IP. That's very warm, very, very high deliverability, very, very good reputation. And then we offer dedicated IPs to larger senders, generally above 100,000 subscribers. That's an extra feature you can add on to your plan. And with that, we actually have a tool called Smart Warming that also takes effect if you add a custom domain to your site. But basically, in either case, we're going to do the warming process for you. We're basically going to find users, and we're going to start that IP. We're going to send, a very small number of users, maybe, just a single digit number of users the first day, and the rest from the shared pool. The next day that you send, we're going to send more users, maybe double that number, through your IP, and we're going to send the rest through the shared IP. And we're basically going to continue this process until your entire list has been migrated from sending from the shared IP to the dedicated IP. Doing that incrementally, make sure that your signals are always really, really good, and that they, kind of what Sketch's email providers out is when they've never seen an IP address before, and then they just see 200,000 emails coming from it. That's a huge red flag to them, because you have unknown reputation. You could be a spammer, you could be a phisher. They don't know, and so your deliverability is going to be severely impacted by that, and it's going to take a little bit of time before you recover or you build up that reputation to end up in the right inbox. So that's why we have smart warming. That's why we use it automatically. Dedicated IPs is the practice of basically having a separate IP address from the shared pools. The reason why people would do that would be if you are a large company, you have a huge list that you are running a maybe substantial business through. You may want to mitigate risk, and it could just be purely in the kind of the risk management space where you just want to make sure that you kind of are controlling all the variables. We've really never had major problems with our IPs, and I'm not jinxing it, I'm knocking on wood as we speak. We have a huge amount of volume. We have great sending practices, so the shared IP is completely suitable. There are just cases where sometimes by compliance, like company has to be on a shared IP, so that might be a reason why. But yeah, it's just something that's out there. But yeah, we'll move on from there. Unless, Mariska, do you have anything to add about shared dedicated IPs, warming, anything like that?
So basically, I mean, exactly what you said. The important part with warming is it goes with that trust. So you are slowly getting the recipient to trust you and who you say you are, and that you're going to send consistently. And that is incredibly important to deliverability.
Amazing. Cool. So we've probably covered a lot of these already, but I think this is a cool checklist that people can review and just make sure that they're not hitting any of these. So I'm sure, Mariska, you'll have some feedback here, but I'll run through these pretty quickly. So red flags off the bat: spam trigger words. We mentioned those earlier in the call, but basically, I have a fun story. I think I shared this before on another webinar, but basically, a user reach out saying, "Hey, I'm getting like 5% open rates. I don't know what's going on. I think all my messages are going to spam, and can you help me?" I'm like, of course, yeah. Let's figure out what's going on. I could see their posts were fine. They were not bad posts or anything like that. They weren't spamming, phishing, anything like that. And then I jumped into their welcome email, and their welcome email was like, "Claim your free gift card!" Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark! And essentially, their welcome email was basically entering people to win a free gift card if they interacted with the welcome email. So in theory, kind of a unique way to drive engagement with that welcome email and start building those signals. But one of the most famous scams, obviously, is the gift card scam. And so if you say like free gift card and you use all these exclamation marks, you're obviously going to get blocked. And so none of his messages were making to this inbox. And I was like, oh, after like this huge investigation where I couldn't find any signals, I literally just saw this one welcome email. I was like, well, bro, like that's why. And he fixed it, and overnight his deliverability problems were fixed. But it really is kind of the one of the easiest things to avoid, just making sure that when users are seeing those subject lines or the body of the content, it couldn't be construed as some sort of scam. There are lists. We might have a blog post on this. I don't have it handy, but if you want to go and Google spam trigger words, there's tons and tons of articles that exist to share. I'd actually be kind of surprised if we don't have an article on our blog, but I just don't have the link handy. But similarly, kind of with that, part of that is like fully capitalized words, exclamation marks all over the place. You can obviously use them sparingly, but like don't use them in every sentence. Don't use like 5 of them in your subject line, and so forth. Basically, your from name should basically. I think we do this automatically for folks, but make sure that like the sender, who you're sending from, and the address and everything is all unified. I think we do this automatically. I think you wouldn't be able to fuck this up, you wouldn't be able to mess this up on our platform. But like making sure that there's all this agreement between the different parts of the technical parts of the header. Making sure that when you send messages, they're not image heavy. So this is not a problem you'll face on Beehive, but you may in other places where if you're sending emails that are just full images that are embedded into the email, can make the emails very, very heavy. Also, just having that image in the email itself can be a red flag because those images, can be, um, malicious. And so we automatically pull in emails from an external source, so spam checkers can see, okay, this is a legit, file path and whatnot. Makes it lightweight, but also allows, best deliverability, best practices. Um, making sure that your links aren't broken. So sending something where it's like doesn't resolve to it goes to 404. Spam checkers are going to check all of the links that you send out. So using something like a Bitly or kind of a link shortener, big red flag because it seems like you might be a spammer trying to get somebody to click to a link that they don't know that they're heading to, and so uh, don't do that. You know, I think this is less of a concern with Beehive, but poor text to image ratio. This is one of those things that, if it's just all images, no text, can be a little bit of a flag, but we don't typically see that issue for newsletters. Um, Obviously, lack of authentication. So we deploy DKIM and SPF automatically. We also provide tools to show you how to set your DMARC. We may actually deploy DMARC now. Don't quote me on this. We released a feature literally 2 days ago, or we may not even released it yet, announced it yet, but we have a new feature within our custom domain tool where you can basically, we do it for you. You basically tell us the domain that you want to set as your custom domain. And there's like a walkthrough with a tool called Entry that we've partnered with that basically updates your DNS settings with whoever your host is. So if you use GoDaddy or Squarespace or whoever to buy your domain, this tool will basically set up all of those records for you. It's one of the biggest pain points that we've seen with users, having to navigate kind of these very technical panels. Don't quote me. I don't know that we deploy DMARC automatically now, but that was something that you had to do manually because we didn't have access to your DNS. The other two we have always deployed automatically because we can do that on our side. Um, and maybe in the follow-up, I can verify whether we deploy DMARC, and if we don't, we probably should if we have that ability with this new tool. Um, Obviously, high spam rates and bounces. You should monitor your list and make sure that you're cleaning and removing senders who both mark as spam or have high bounce rates. I believe we automatically remove. Do we automatically remove spam complaint people? If you marked an email as spam, do we automatically remove them from a list? Do you know, Mariska?
So I believe that we auto unsubscribe complaints and unsubscribes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, that's what I thought as well. I don't know that we auto unsubscribe bounces just because sometimes bounces are not permanent. Um, this is a little bit of an area where I'm outside my depth, but I know with our marketing tools, like I can see like show me people who have bounced once, and I see a huge list, and then I go into their profiles and I can see that they've received and opened other emails. So um, a single bounce doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a real email. But if you see somebody who's consistently bouncing over and over and over again, I believe our upstream vendor SendGrid may do something as well if like it's just getting bounced a bunch of times, but I could be wrong about that. But monitor that yourself with a segment. Remove those users if you see it happening repeatedly. And then inconsistent sending patterns. This is why I talk about consistency, making sure that you're sending in that consistent cadence. If you go from sending daily to sending, if you've been sending daily for years and years and years, and you just start sending, if you've been sending weekly for years and years and years, and you start sending daily, that can be a little bit of a red flag. So like ramp that up, maybe start sending 3 times a week and then move to week daily. And then obviously one of the biggest red flags is if you just start sending, if you were sending it to 10,000 users and you just bump that up to 100K, that's gonna be a huge red flag. Where did those users come from? Usually there's like not really a legit use case where that would happen. Some of the legit use cases might be you bought another newsletter and you're incorporating their list using ethical opt-in practices, but that happens very rarely. And there's ways to like be smart about that. But if you just automatically just start seeing like a huge influx, it's going to raise red flags all over the place. Us as well. We're going to see, hey, where did these people come from? What is like the makeup of this audience? And it's gonna raise the hackles, so to speak. Mariska, anything to contribute?
Yeah, so like again, these things reinforce following best sending practices. If you are sending information or content that is relatable to the recipient, that is expected and on a consistent cadence, you're not going to be hitting any of these red flags. Ultimately, we want to make sure that senders are uh, or that recipients are expecting emails from us, that they have clearly opted in, and we are following uh, proper authentication, and we're sending content that they want to engage with, spending the extra time to go ahead and look through the content and fact check it and grammar check it and so on and so forth, in order to make sure that it is digestible to the person receiving it.
Amazing. Thank you. That's perfect. And with that said, I think we're ready to jump into our playbooks. So um, I have three here: one on running a deliverability audit, one on um, welcoming your new subscribers, and a third on the IP warming process if you're not on Beehive. So if you're a Beehive user, it's two playbooks, sorry. But for anybody who may be a new user who hasn't been convinced to join Beehive yet throughout this call, we do have something for you as well. So first one, deliverability audit. I'm going to go through these really quickly because I do want to get to the Q&A, and we have just a few minutes left. But this is a playbook that I've run extensively in my history as a marketer working for agencies. We'll include these links. This deck will be downloadable, and you'll be able to see these links and click through them. But basically, this tool, it's called MX Toolbox. It'll let you it'll tell you what your SPF, DMARC, and DKIM are and flag any issues. There's a tool called Mail Tester where you can send an email to the service, and it'll show you an audit of like anything that's missing, anything you can fix. One of the most valuable tools I've used across my career was literally working with a company that I was advising, and they were like, "Hey, one of the things we have a challenge with is our re-engagement emails. They just don't seem to get that much that much engagement." So they pulled open their interface. They weren't on Beehive. This wasn't a Beehive client, but they opened up their sender, and they have like a 5% open rate. I'm like, dude, like this isn't just low engagement. Like you guys have spam. This is like a spam issue. Like this is, I felt like an exterminator. Like you got ants. You have spam. Let's figure this out. So I literally just had them send a test email to this service, Mail Tester, and it literally pinpointed exactly what it was. It turned out their DMARC wasn't set up correctly. They had one, but it was configured wrong. So they fixed it immediately. Like a couple weeks later, they were sending me, what is it, fruit basket, because they were up to 30% again. You can check your IP address reputation using this tool. I prefer a tool. It's called Talos. It's by Talos. It's by Cisco, but it just will show you your reputation. There might be some better ones that maybe Mariska can contribute. But I've used that one, fine over the years. And then this tool called Glock Apps will give you a seed list that you can upload into your account and then send a test to that seed list. And then it'll show you the inboxes that you're landing in. So you can see, okay, on Yahoo, I'm in this inbox, and Google, I'm in primary, in et cetera, and so forth. So between all four of these tools, you'll get a really, really solid picture of your deliverability, and you can see if there are any issues, exactly where you can pinpoint what to fix. Real quick, Mariska, do you have any other tools for reputation? I know we mentioned earlier in the talk the Google Postmaster tools. Is there like any other like a repository of block lists that they can submit their IP to or whatnot? Something
Sure,
like
the
Talos?
big ones that we use generally are MX Toolbox and Virus Total, because ultimately what we kind of see is that MX Toolbox reports deliverability based uh, reputational information for block lists, like when you are banned from sending email, whereas Virus Total gives a more comprehensive view on security vendors that might have flagged your domain or IP address space. And so we always suggest making sure to check both. There are a lot of other third party vendors or vendors who their data doesn't go into those two repositories, but normally you'll go ahead and receive some sort of complaint from a user or something like that that allows you to whittle down exactly who you might have a reputational issue with.
Perfect. That's amazing. That's super helpful, I'm sure, for the folks listening. So from here, welcoming new subscribers, very simple process. Send a welcome email, ask users to save your address in their contacts list. Pro tip also, you can request that they reply. It can be a very organic thing like, hey, how did you hear about my newsletter? What do you think about this topic? Starts to build that relationship and show the inboxes that you're trusted, because generally you don't reply to untrusted senders. And then one of the things you can also do is like in your subscribe flow, you can set up a custom page that says, hey, thanks for subscribing. Just sent you an email. Before we go a step further, go check your email, send a reply, and then come back here. And then you can just have them have a next button to continue on. You can't necessarily block them from doing anything until they do that, but it's a good practice that just reinforces what you want them to do. Lastly, IP warming process. Use Beehive Smart Warming. It's the easiest thing in the world. You literally don't have to do anything. We do everything automatically for you. You set up a custom domain or you purchase a dedicated IP from us. We're going to do it for you. But if you're on a different platform that maybe doesn't offer that, start with your most engaged users, the ones who open all of your emails. Segment those users out into a group of start with like 4 users on the first day that when you're in the process of transitioning to your new platform. Just upload those 4 users and send a duplicate of your newsletter, one from your old system, one from your new system with those 4 users. The next time you send, take 4 more, so now you have 8. The next day, add 8 more. And basically, it's a very manual process because you're gonna have to be duplicating this work, but it's really critical. You have to go through this process, otherwise you're gonna have a bad time. But it's very manual. It's a huge headache and pain in the ass. So don't do that. Just join Beehive and we'll do it for you. So we have a couple minutes left. We're going to go maybe 2 or 3 minutes past because I started 2 or 3 minutes late. If you have to drop, then I hope you don't. But if you do, I understand. Sorry, Mariska, we'll be 3 minutes late for all hands, but I'm sure people will understand. Tony is going to queue us up with some questions. I will repeat them so you guys can all hear them, and we'll get them answered. Let's take 3. Sure. So I think if I'm wrong, Mariska can correct me, but I believe spam complaint rate is like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent, regardless of your size, because like you just inboxes don't like you see any spam. So it's a very, very, very small number. The other ones were open rate and unsubscribe rate. I'd say unsubscribe rate is a fraction of a percent. I want to say I'll actually just let Mariska answer. I'm sure she actually knows these things. I'm just kind of shooting in the dark from what I've seen, in benchmark blog posts.
Sure. So we're shooting for 0.0 like 1.03 tops for complaint rates, and ultimately we'd like to see less than 3% for unsubscribes. Ideally, we understand that there are circumstances that people might not have the time, and as long as you give them a path, you get deliverability credit for having the means for users to be able to do it.
Yep. And I will say, Mariska, you can tell me if I'm totally wrong, but Tyler told me this, and he, obviously working at Morning Brew, is a little bit has some credibility. He has said before that unsubscribes don't technically count against you because at the end of the day, that's what email providers want to incentivize. It's like if somebody doesn't want to get an email, they want them to unsubscribe. So it's a good signal because it would mean, if it's high over a long period of time, it may mean that you're not collecting users with consent. They're not, getting the value they thought they would. And that can basically be a red flag of different types of deeper problems. But can you confirm or deny, is that the case? If you basically ask a bunch of people to unsubscribe if they're not interested in receiving your message anymore, are you going to get dinged by email providers?
So I think you hit the nail right on the head so it could potentially be a sign if you are sending to users who have not provided consent, and let's say you send 100 emails and out of the 170 of them unsubscribe, that's going to be a red flag. But if you're following the best sending practices and you have 30 users unsubscribe, it's going to be less likely in the same way if those opt-ins are falling off over time.
Makes sense. So over time, obviously fine. If you see big spikes, that's going to be a problem. Awesome. Tony, let's get the next one. Yeah, so this is a super challenging problem for the industry as a whole. There's a couple things at work here. So There's obviously the mail protection policy, which opens all of your emails. If you're on an Apple device, it's going to download your emails asynchronously so that we can't get like the IP locations and stuff like that. But it's also in that process going to mark them all as red. There's other tools that will strip out the tracking pixels, so none of them will be marked as red. So there's not really like one single problem here in the industry. I'm sorry. The question was with all of the challenges to the stuff that Apple's implementing. What are the best practices to make sure that the people that we're tracking engagement for actually are either unengaged or are engaged? And so from there, I was saying that there's a bunch of different challenges across the industry. There's the challenge of mail privacy protection, but tools like Hey, which is an email tool from the people who make Basecamp, they remove all of the pixels. So it's like for some, all of them are going to be marked as open. Others, none are going to be marked as open. Spam filters will go into your email and click all of the links. We've deployed very robust tools for bot click tracking and removing those bot clicks from reporting. But from a marketing perspective, it's a challenge that we face all the time. There's ways to get around it in terms of like, not just measuring open rate, but also measuring like the engagement rate of like people who are actually clicking through and taking action. There's some ways that we've done that before of like just saying, hey, like if you want to stay subscribed, click this button and having it be a very active choice to stay subscribed. And if you don't click that button, we're going to remove you from the list. And so that's a much better way. Sometimes we will see people say, hey, I don't know why you think I'm unengaged. Like I open every email. And unfortunately, the response there is, sorry, there's like just this new world of privacy where we can't necessarily be perfect with that. There's not a single answer to this in the industry. At the end of the day, people are using these tools because of like the privacy concerns, and so overcoming those is like literally would be running counter to why they're using them in the first place. And so it's like a balance between respecting people's desire for privacy and getting our users the data that they ask for. And so, yeah, the best we can do is basically provide alternatives to do this. Mariska, is there anything I missed there?
Yeah, what my feedback would be is within the email that you're sending, you want to provide a call to action for your user, something that you can get measurable engagement data with, whether that be for them to respond or reply to the email or to click on a link, fill out a poll, something that gets them engaged to show their intent of participating with your content.
Amazing. Perfect. With that said, we'll cut off Q&A and we will answer any other questions that need to be answered. We'll add those to the FAQ in the post when we make it. Obligatory, if this was useful and you're not a paying Beehive member, I highly recommend you upgrade. Not only will you get access to all of our powerful features, we didn't necessarily go into a ton of them today because this was kind of more about deliverability generally and not necessarily in the platform, but smart warming, super relevant here, segmentation, being able to send to those segments automations to automate some of this process of engagement. All of those things, or not all of those are part of our paid plans, but they can be included in our paid plans. But specifically with a paid Beehive account, you get access to our Beehive publisher community. We have, I think, close to 3,000, maybe 4,000 people in that group, hundreds of posts a week, dozens a day, super engaged. Posts on, there was like 10 different channels. There's like how-to, feature requests, feedback on newsletters, a general channel just to connect, recommendations. There's a bunch of really, really useful things. When you sign up for Beehive, what we're going to do is we're going to send you that invite. When you upgrade to your paid account, we're going to send you that invite. If you are a paid user and you don't have access, you can email me at ej@beehive.com. We don't give away Mariska's email for security reasons. Nobody knows where she lives. She's in a bunker in Nebraska, 500 feet underground, protected, so no one can get to her. But real talk, basically, as a security person, obviously people have questions, and she can't answer 99.9% of them. It's like the NSA trying to get anything out of her. So, but if you want to get access to the Slack community, you can email me. I'll put you in connect with our community manager, who can resend that link. Typically, if you are a paid user but you signed up for Slack with a different email than is in your Beehive account, that's where there's a mismatch. We can solve that. It's just, that's why it might not have worked. But yeah, upgrade to Beehive. most value-packed email platform in the world if you're not already a paying user. I got to work on that pitch. So if you guys have tips for me, email me those tips for my pitch as well. Still workshopping it. Uh, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate your willingness to go a couple minutes over with us. Mariska, thank you so much for your time and taking away from the valuable work you do with us. Tony in the background, kind of our eyes and ears. You're the man. I would say thanks to both Tony and Mariska, and thank you to you out there in your screen. You are what makes this all worthwhile and makes us be able to wake up every day excited to continue to build Beehive into the best platform out there in the world. So yeah, thanks so much. Have a great day. We'll send the recordings in a timely manner. Talk to you soon and see you in the next one. Bye.
He's so manicured, and he's like he put together, like, a really comprehensive deck. I was, like, shocked.